Okay, yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Rugby Muscle Podcast. I'm your host, as always, TJ, and today we are diving into a really bloody important topic, and you'll get to see exactly why. It should be obvious why, but I really want to go into explaining why and what to do about it, and we're going to be talking about in-season training. You see, too many players think that the season is just about maintaining and potentially just doing rugby and forgetting about physical preparedness, forgetting about strength and conditioning. But as I'm going to explain today, that is not the case. In season is still absolutely a time that you can and probably should be making progress as a rugby player. So if that's something that interests you, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you're listening on Spotify, hit the three dots and give us a 5-star review. Do that right now, nice and early. It really does help out, and then you can just listen to the rest of the episode and enjoy it. Of course, if you have any thoughts along the way, hit the three dots on Spotify, let me know in the comments, or in YouTube, just go down to the comments. And of course, if you want to work with me, if you want to find out more about Rugby Muscle, specializing in amateur rugby strength and conditioning, the links to work with Rugby Muscle will be in the description below, as well as our free school community. Okay, so we'll start with the two common reasons and misconceptions as to why players don't bother trying to make progress in season. Firstly, it comes from guys that are either unorganized or just experience, or they feel like they experience a lot of fatigue from the games, from training, and they feel like they always want to be fresh, and that there's just no point in going into the gym or even trying because they're not as fresh to lift as heavy as they probably do in the off season. That we'll address a little bit later, and that's just a case of potentially just organizing yourself a little bit better and understanding what the goal is of your in-season training. And then number two, it's this belief that in-season training is just all about maintaining your current fitness and strength and conditioning levels. And this essentially is what the mainstream strength and conditioning advice potentially can be. I hear this a lot in university. I see it a lot in the literature. And this is okay for Olympic caliber athletes and in professional rugby, where athletes have to manage loads from really heavy, intense games. Like you see the impacts that happen at a professional level, and their training is more about surviving the grind of a long season. Their training during the week is also, they're getting a lot of quality rugby sessions that they really have to manage themselves really well. But in amateur rugby, the situation is different. You're almost certainly not going to experience the same levels of wear and tear from your rugby and your training as professional players. Amateur players at most have one tough game during the season, but the fitter and the stronger that you are, the less that is going to impact you throughout the week. And also your rugby training session, you're probably going to have one tough session and one sort of team run-ish sessions. At most, you're going to have two sort of tough-ish sessions. And again, those can easily be accounted for when we're actually getting into the nitty-gritty of our training. The other thing I would note is for professional athletes, their overall preparedness levels are just going to be that much higher that they're allowed to sort of account for that degrade during the season. They're just going to be so supremely fit by the end of pre-season, so strong, so prepared already that they can almost put all of that on maintenance, maybe challenge one area to increase, but overall not worry too much about it. And I think that is such a key. If you're an amateur player and you want to improve your performance, like that shouldn't only be done during the off season. You're going to severely limit the amount of time for yourself to improve. And to me, this is it. This is exactly why it is so important to be training in season. The season for most amateur rugby players is going to be, or any rugby player, is going to be 6 to 8 months, right? And potentially even longer if you're counting pre-season and stuff during those times as well. So if you're not training consistently during that time, you're not just missing out on that time that you have to improve, like 50+% of your total year is going to be not training. If you think about what you're going to lose during that time, you're essentially just going to be regaining what you've lost once the season ends. So when you do get back to training at the end of the season, your fitness would have degraded so much that all of your off season is spent sort of making up for lost time. And then once you do that, what you end up happening is setting up such a poor sort of mindset, because you have to make up for lost time, that you overshoot yourself, that you burn yourself out, that you set out unrealistic expectations, and you probably end up not even making as much progress in the off season. So what you need to really have is this sort of year-round approach. And rather than sacking everything off or even changing the goals, as I'll talk to you about in a minute, what you must do instead is just train year round. And if you're in the rugby season, that means that you have to potentially just like focus a little bit more on the fatigue reduction, and really be crystal clear of where you're going to put your stimulus, where you're going to recover, and that you're going to be fresh for not just your games, but potentially some of your training sessions as well, and adjust your training week according to that. But you don't just give up on training, you are always training year round. And that is where the beauty of like compound interest happens. That is where you continually train, you continually improve, and that is where the magic happens. Because this stuff like rugby strength and conditioning, speed, power, aerobic capacity, and strength hypertrophy, as we speak about a lot on this channel, on this podcast, those things, and movement athleticism absolutely as well, these things take a long time to manifest. These things take a long time to make astounding improvements. You can make a quick gain after a few weeks, potentially after a month or so, but you keep hacking away at this stuff month after month after month, which then bleeds into year after year. That is when the progress becomes like head turning. That is when the progress becomes really noticeable on the pitch, and season on season you become a significantly better rugby player that enjoys the game more than ever. In order to do this, you're going to still be training the 5 elements of rugby strength and conditioning. You're just going to manage fatigue in a little bit of a better way. I'll give some example training splits at the end of this video, at the end of this podcast, but I think for now it's really important that we emphasize these 5 elements and how to manage fatigue so that you can apply them for your own training, for your own week, and be able to include them, or like prioritize your training in this way. So the 5 elements of rugby strength and conditioning, if you aren't aware of these, I've done several podcasts and videos on this in the past, so go back over them if you want those in a little bit more detail. But they are essentially conditioning, like aerobic conditioning, strength slash size, speed, power, and then movement slash athleticism. Not every player needs to train all of these elements equally at all times. In fact, during the season, that's practically going to be impossible. You need to be focusing on your weaknesses and what you need to prioritize at any given time. So you need to prioritize the area that's going to give you the most benefit. If you're a prop that's really weak, yes, you need to place a big emphasis on getting stronger. If you're a prop that's strong enough but find yourself getting gassed after 20 minutes, or you're really slow, then you need to work on your conditioning and your speed. You're already strong enough, so the strength, like the amount of time that you're going to spend on your strength work, needs to come down to like allow for those other areas to improve. Your weekly structure is then going to be built around how you're going to prioritize these. So I've already touched on that, right? With that element of bringing the weight work down to allow for more conditioning, more speed work to be done. This isn't just in a fatigue management like sort of process. This is also like time management. This is, you've only got a certain amount of time that you can train during the week. And then when we add in that fatigue management, it's even less, or it needs to be paid more attention to. So this is something that you have to consider for yourself, your week, your schedule, and your individual situation. I set out a way for you to go through this in the school group, in the Rugby Athlete Blueprint. So if you want to get access to that, I have a link in the description below to check that out. Now, when it comes to managing fatigue, it's not just about game day. Yes, you absolutely must be fresh and firing every Saturday or whenever your games are, but it's also about planning your week so that you're fresh for your most important sessions. Mostly that's going to be your one really high intensity rugby session that you're going to have, but it could also be your heavy, hard, maybe your speed sessions. Those things also need to be considered when you're trying to arrange your training week. I want to touch on that rugby training element as well, because for a lot of you watching, your rugby training is going to be your one real big time to make improvements as a rugby player. Yes, you can get stronger, faster, fitter, all of that stuff, but it all comes together during rugby training. When you're doing your little practice games or when you're doing your drills, that is a chance for you to utilize this new strength, utilize this new fitness to get up and take part in play after play, or utilize your speed to make breaks, or utilize your athleticism to put on some footwork to move around the opposition. that only comes from practice, from your rugby training session. So if you really want to prioritize those, you have to do that with your strength and conditioning. So you have to make sure that you're not going into that session overly fatigued. Likewise, if you're auditioning for a starting jersey, right? If you've got a number of players that are vying for that same jersey as you, you're not going to, like, your coach isn't going to listen to you when you say, sorry coach, I know I sucked today at training, but I did some really heavy squats yesterday, so don't worry, by Saturday I'm going to be awesome. He's not going to trust that. He's going to pick someone else ahead of you. So again, this might be a consideration for you as a player. And then when it comes to your strength sessions, if you're already feeling ground to the ground, beaten down, ground to a pulp, if you're feeling overly fatigued, probably not a good idea to go in and do some heavy deadlifts. Probably also a terrible idea to try and do some max speed work. So that has to be accounted for when you're trying to organize your week. But having said that, sometimes it is okay to feel a little bit tired for some of the lighter sessions during the week, and that's okay. You don't have to take days off just because you're tired. You could potentially just do a lighter aerobic session or an upper body power session. Sometimes you can go into a session feeling really tired, get a bit of blood flow, do a good warm up, move really fast, and you actually end up feeling better. So again, this relationship isn't just fatigue avoidance, it's fatigue management. It's about how you can balance that fatigue to hit all of your markers that you need to hit during the week, or as many as you can hit during the week, and still be fresh for game day. So far this has all been kind of conceptual. Let's put some examples so that you can really wrap your head around. I'll put a picture of how this first week will lay out. This is not necessarily an ideal week, but this is a great setup for someone who has the ability to do some double days. This might mean that they go into the gym straight before their rugby session. Say they get off at work at like 4 or 5 p.m. They can get into the gym for 6, have an hour session, and then rugby starts at 7:30. This would work really well for that. Maybe they go do their session in lunchtime, or maybe they do it in the morning. Either way, they're able to double up on their days so that their real intense days can be done on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so that they can really push themselves and then leave the other days for recovery. So Monday we have speed and power. You're going to be probably not necessarily completely recovered, but you're going to be most fresh given what's coming for the rest of the week on this day. So we're going to put our speed and power work on Monday that enables you to move fast, move explosively, move yourself and potentially some weights nice and quick, and also not induce a whole lot of fatigue, so that you're then set up to continue to make improvements during the week. Then we've got Tuesday, which is our first double day. We're going to do full body strength and then our rugby training session. Then Wednesday can either be off, or it can be some off-feet aerobic work. So we're still able to get in some quality work, improve our conditioning without causing too much fatigue. In fact, what we're going to do with this session is actually dissipate some of that fatigue. So with this session, because it's such low in intensity, we're able to really recover and then come back on Thursday, which is our strength and rugby day again, potentially with an optional speed session coming in just before rugby, so that we can really, that's going to be a real high intensity day, not necessarily really high in volume, but we're going to get some quality work on that Thursday as well. And then Friday, if you have the time available, I do like a nice low volume power work. This sets you up really well for your Saturday game, not only to give you some extra like power and all the benefits that come from, long-term power training, but actually potentiate you to perform at your best on that Saturday. There's no fatigue coming from this Friday session. If anything, you're going to wake up feeling even better and be primed to play at your best. And then on Saturday, we've got our game day. Sunday, you can have off. You could even, for those that are dedicated and potentially aren't like overly fatigued, don't have a real high stress job, do everything else really well, you could even potentially squeeze in some aerobic work on this day too. This structure works really well if you have the time and can manage both rugby and gym work on the same day. It allows you to hit all of the key areas: speed, power, strength, and conditioning, whilst managing your game day performance. And you can also adapt this to your needs, potentially adding extra upper body work, potentially adding in some strength work even more, potentially even adding some low intensity aerobic work throughout these sessions as well. It all would depend on you, your specific needs, and your recovery needs. A second example I'm going to put up here, and I'll also read it out for the podcast, is someone that can only commit to evening sessions. So this means that we're probably not going to be able to do things optimally, meaning that we've got Monday as our full body strength day. Again, This isn't going to cause too much fatigue if we keep the volume fairly low and we are smart with the way that we lift. We're going to be fine. We have to get strength in somewhere. This is probably going to be our best day. Tuesday, we've then got rugby. If you can, I would like to get some agility or speed work, or your tempo aerobic work, depending on your needs, done just before your rugby session. So you could show up 20 to 30 minutes early, get nice and warm up, get some quality aerobic work or quality speed work done before your training, and have that not impact your training session. And then again, you've got a good stimulus and you haven't gone out of your way to hit the gym in the morning or anything like that. Wednesday is going to be some optional conditioning work. If, again, you're experiencing high stress with work or your other environments, everything else isn't set up perfectly, you can absolutely take this day off. But if you can, optional conditioning work on this day is a good stimulus. And again, like the other example, we're bringing the training stress all the way down. So we're going to be able to recover for that Thursday session while still getting in a stimulus if we can. Thursday, then we're going to just have our rugby session again, and potentially again still doing the speed work. Maybe we do some straight line speed work, or we do some tempo work on this day as well before your rugby training. If this stuff cannot be done, it's not a huge issue. This is just an extra time if we can get some quality work in. And then on Friday, we're going to hit the weights again. This time, we're going to have more of a power emphasis, just so that we make sure that we don't carry any fatigue into our game on Saturday. Like the last Friday, this is going to prime us for our game, as well as giving us the long-term benefits of getting that second weight session in during the week. Saturday is obviously our game, and then Sunday, again, this is somewhere where I would consider trying to get in that optional conditioning work on the Sunday. Again, it's not absolutely necessary, but it is an opportunity for you to be able to make some improvements. So this schedule works really well if you don't have any availability at all for some double days, which is the reality for a lot of you, and that's okay. This way, you still get into the weights room twice a week, so you're still getting a quality stimulus there. You're still able to get some level of conditioning work, some level of speed work if you can around that. But if you have to prioritize one of those areas, then I would give that the actual prioritization it deserves. Maybe taking out one of those weight sessions if, again, those other things are going to be a priority. You're still going to get your overall stimulus as needed. This one is just across the board with as minimal volume as possible to still make improvements. One final note I will say about these training weeks is that players often do worry about training the day before a game. But as long as the session is really low in volume and your focus is on explosiveness, it's not going to negatively impact your performance on the game. It's actually going to enhance your performance on the game. And the long-term benefits that come with hitting that second session or that third session during the week or whatever session it is, that extra session in the long run is going to pay off massively. It's going to add up. Those months are going to add up and you're going to get significantly better than if you just constantly took those days off. So those examples are just to give you an idea of what you can do. Don't just copy them and go, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Cheers, TJ. I'm just going to nick that. That's now my new training split. There is no perfect training split. You have to pay attention to the rest of the stuff that I've said in this video because that is really important. You have to really think about what you need as a rugby player and how you're going to improve. And also, one final point I'll add is that there's always going to be trade-offs. Sometimes your situation just isn't going to be ideal. Sometimes you can't train exactly as you planned due to work, stress, or life. It's okay to sometimes break some of the periodization guidelines that I've already laid out. Sometimes you're going to have to, only get in the gym the day straight after rugby. Maybe your aerobic session has to be the day of your rugby training as well. There are just going to be different ways that you have to square this circle, and you have to accept that because you're just going to have to put in work. Sometimes this isn't perfect, but the intent on making progress and still managing fatigue as best as you can is the way that you're going to be able to get it done. I've worked with several people that can only get 2 training sessions done during the season, so we just have to prioritize what they need to do and manage the rest as best we can. We're still concurrently training, we're still progressing, like making phenomenal progress as a rugby player, but we have to just organize it and accept our limitations on our training week. And if you do that and you still put in the work and you put in the work week on week on week, and those weeks turn into months and those months turn into seasons, you're going to make serious progress. So much more progress than you would have done if you'd have just waited for things to be perfect. So Takeaway here is simple. In season isn't just about maintaining, isn't just about giving up, isn't just about only doing your rugby training. It's about continuing to make progress just as you had done in the off season, but just prioritizing what matters most for you, structuring your week to fit your goals, and managing your fatigue smartly so that you can also then play and do your rugby. And most importantly, staying consistent on that path, continuing to evolve as an athlete. That is what makes this whole process so much more fun. If you've got any questions about in-season training or need help setting up your schedule or anything like that, drop a comment in the comments below. Hit the links to see if you want to work with Rugby Muscle personally. As always, if you found this episode helpful and you haven't done already, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the podcast, give the 5-star reviews, or even if you've got a teammate who is struggling to train in season, send this to them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.